Spoiler alert for Mushoku Tensei Volume 17. If you haven't read it, then I suggest you do so before continuing on to this video. Now that Pergus is on the same side as Ariel, Rudius and his friends make their way to Asura Kingdom in hopes of putting Ariel on the throne. But little do they know, it will not be as easy as they think. Hello everybody, this is the Anime Bro here, and welcome to another video. And today, I'll be reviewing Mushoku Tensei Volume 17. Now before this video starts, please like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this. And come back next time as I talk about Volume 18. And now, let's begin the video. So the first thing I want to talk about is the story. Now Volume 17 had a lot of great moments in it. It was really exciting in this volume. You got so many action sequences, you got so many twists, and especially with Ariel being the main character of this volume, it was really amazing what she was able to do. And just seeing her triumph over all the stuff that was placed in front of her was really great. Definitely one of my favorite volumes in it. But not only that, but I think one of the coolest things that I didn't know I wanted was Luke's perspective. At the part when Luke went crazy, it was really amazing that we got the perspective of what he was thinking. In fact, it was there where I realized, wow, I kind of get what he's going at. Eventually, he became a person where I couldn't really care less to a guy I honestly enjoyed. It's really sad that I might not see him ever again because he's there with Ariel doing his duties and Rudius is not likely to ever return there, but it was a really good way to send off these characters. One final big moment that each character was able to get. Now, I do have a problem with this volume, and that is it should have been more than one. I think this volume would have done really well if it was 2 volumes, and spread it out a bit, because the fact that we got the traveling part there, and the big finale at the end with all the crazy stuff, and all the goodbyes, didn't feel good for me. I just think that the biggest part of this volume that was not that great was the beginning. I could see the first half being like a build-up part, put some more scheming down, get to see how Ariel really is, get to see how much prepared she is for this thing, and then probably in the next volume we do all this crazy stuff where she tries to act out all the things she needs to do. But we really didn't get that. In fact, this volume to me kind of felt a bit rushed. There was a lot of missed opportunities in there. We could have explored more of this world. We could have explored more of how the politics work in this world, more world building. But instead, it really did just focus on the story, and it seemed like he just wanted to get this out there. And that's kind of a shame, because when the one thing that people talk about this series is the world building, and one of the biggest cities is just summed up in like a page, that's kind of a big disappointment, because I want to see this. I want to actually read the experience that Rudius goes to actually explore this and all that stuff. I don't want it to be something that is just out of the way. I want to just experience this myself. I want Rudius to go to these places. I want Rudius to actually interact with the people. I don't want to be told the world building and then just continue the story. I want the world building to be part of the story, in my opinion, and I really do enjoy it when a story does that. But all in all, this was a great volume. Not the greatest. I don't know if I'm going back on what I said earlier, but it is a good volume in the series. Alright, now let's talk about some characters. So the first character I want to talk about is Amber. Amber is a North God style and is really compared to a ninja. And when you see him fight, it really is actually understandable, because he uses a lot of tricks. He doesn't really fight fair because he uses whatever way to get the win, basically. So he uses poisons and stuff. He traps you down on the ground. He does some tricks, typical ninja stuff. If you see Naruto, minus all the crazy magical things that happen in it, that's basically what he does. And also, even though he fights dirty, it's not like he's a bad guy. During the end, he kind of had a hard time actually deciding whether he was actually going to do his job or not, because the guy he was working for was terrible. But he had a job to do and he did it. So in a way, he's kind of a great character, pretty amazing, and I think we could have got more development with him. I knew we'd get some more moments with the extra chapters with him helping Eris and all that, but in this volume I could have wanted more, maybe get to know a bit of like how he came to be. But all in all, he was a good character with the moments we got, and that's all I have to say about him. Next we got Isolda. Now Isolda is a friend of Eris and Glycian, and she uses the water god style. And during this time, she actually joined the Royal Knights because her master, Rita, actually made her do that because she was working with a terrible man. And he wanted backup just in case something were to happen. And that's why, she's there. And she really is a good friend to Eris. In fact, towards the end, she really was concerned about Eris because Rudius had 2 wives while Eris was training like crazy. And she saw that as unfair. Well, it's kind of understandable, really. A girl goes training for you, and when she comes back to you, you're already married and stuff. So it's really understandable why she feels like Eris got a pretty bad deal in the situation. And she had a good farewell, I guess, at the very end. But all in all, she didn't really get as much moment like Amber. She did have a bad experience in this volume with seeing her master die, and we do kind of get a bit of sympathy for her, but she wasn't really built up as much, and honestly wasn't even as interesting as Amber, in my opinion. So yeah, that's all I have to say about her. And now that we're on the topic of her, let's talk about her master, Rita. Now Rita is an old lady and is the master of the North God style. And when she was younger, she was actually saved by Darius and came back to basically pay him back. She mostly did this because of the man god. The man god said, hey, there's a person that saved you, you could actually pay him back, and kind of used that to manipulate her because that's what the man god does. He's a pretty bad dude, and she eventually also gets killed. Now, unlike her pupil, she does have a good character because it shows she wasn't just doing this for the money, The man god manipulated her to actually pay back a debt. And even though the man was a terrible person, and she even admitted this, she still did it because she really wanted to do something good for him. And I think in some contexts, she kind of did love him because of that. But after like a while, when he was doing terrible things, she just was like, yeah, this person is not for me. And she is an interesting character, one of the great interesting characters in this volume. This volume really did have great characters all in all. Mostly in the minor category, major characters and stuff like that, we already did know, and they just got some great moments here. So I will kind of be leaving some of them out, just some of them, just the major ones, like the really major ones. But Rita being a minor character was definitely a really interesting one. Next we got Philion Greyrat. Philion Greyrat is the head of the Notice Greyrat family and is the younger brother of Paul. Now, Rudius actually describes him as being in his mid-30s, which is understandable, and is actually kind of looks similar to Paul, which again is very understandable. But unlike Paul, Rudius actually says he looks very cowardly, and we actually do get to see this in this volume when he's begging to join back on Princess Ariel's side. He really is a coward in the sense. It's kind of still understandable because he's trying to protect his house and all that, but the thing about politics is that it is a dangerous business, and just to quote something, if you play the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die, and he certainly really could have died there. And one final thing is that he really hates Rudius, mostly because he thinks that Rudius will take his spot because he has a more rightful claim than Philemon for Rudius actually being the eldest son's son. But Rudius doesn't really care about that. Yeah, that's all I have to say about him. Not much to it. He is a bit interesting, but not really the most interesting person on this list. Next, we got Prince Gabriel, the brother of Princess Ariel. Now, Princess Gabriel is a middle-aged blonde man, which is pretty interesting because Ariel's so young and he is middle-aged. It's really, really kind of fascinating on the age difference between these two. Rudius kind of describes him as a businessman, but in a way, he also really describes him as a man that you want to follow So it's kind of understandable how he was able to get so many people to back him. He looked confident, he looked like the part of a ruler, and all in all was probably going to be a good ruler. The only reason why it wouldn't work was because of the man god. That was like the only thing that mattered at the situation. Also the fact that he was supporting a bad guy, but you know, the bad guy kind of did his job well, I guess. And in politics, it doesn't matter if you're a really good guy or a really bad person. If you know how to do your job, people don't really care. Or if you have the power, people don't really care. It's a sad fact, but it's also one that is true. And that's all I have to say about him. All in all, he probably would have been a good ruler, but you know, the man god had to go down, so we had to go with Princess Ariel. And then finally, we got the, I guess, most important character, because this character was one of the major reasons why Gabriel kind of did lost power, and that was Triss. Now, Triss is a very rough lady. She grew up in like the worst circumstances ever. She was once a noble, but then she was sold as a slave at a young age. And after some time, she became a member of a bandit group, and eventually started becoming the leader of the bandit group. But, you know, she actually gets a good, happy ending at the end. It kind of shows that justice does prevail. She was able to beat up with Ariel, she was able to beat up with her family, she was able to reunite with everyone, and all in all take down the guy who really ruined her life. As a character, she probably would have had more good time if, like I said, this was not rushed to one volume. There could have been so much more time building her up as a person, but we just got this little interaction with her, and then she was just important at the very end. Which I do have to say is one problem I forgot to mention. Characters weren't really done justice. Some of them were, but others were not done justice, like Trish. And it's a really sad thing. Now, that's the end of the characters, but obviously I forgot to leave out one major one, and that was Luke. And I decided to leave him out because, well, we already know Luke, and we just got more information on him. We haven't seen him through all these volumes, so, you know, if you read the volume, you know what he's been doing. Again, you know what Rudius has been thinking about. So I really didn't think I needed to put him here. But all in all, that's all the characters. We did get a whole bunch of them, and I kind of did enjoy that. Alright, now let's talk about location. So the first location that I want to talk about is Ricket. Now, not much is known about this location, besides really these four things. It's near the south edge of the Donata region, has the only road from the Donata region to the Royal region, so it is a hub for trading, mostly for, you know, the Royal region, so it is a very important part of this region, and it is a very big city. And that's kind of it. I really think we could have probably put more into world building. Like I said, if we split this into 2 different volumes instead of keeping this as one. 4 things for a place that are kind of obvious, I guess, are pretty boring, especially for a video like this. But anyways, that is just a minor city. We now get to talk about the major city of ours. And I will say this, all this came from the one page that written in, and we didn't get to explore any of it. So, from the book that Rudius read, this is what they have to say about ours. The capital of Asura, which was one of those things. So, ours is the largest city in the world. It was named after the legendary hero who led mankind to victory in the Great Human Demon War. So, its name kind of comes from history. You know, like how some places are named after Washington in America. It has a castle at the center called the Silver Palace, which is surrounded by great mansions of high nobles. It has an enormous arena, which is the training ground for the royal guards. It is filled with Millist churches, which is like Christianity, so that's kind of understandable. Has lots of canals. Has many headquarters of the world's largest businesses. Has original halls of the great water god style, which kind of understands why Rita and her pupil were there. Has a famous playhouse of the theater district. Has the great gate built to celebrate Ashura's victory in the Laplace War, and is one of the oldest cities to ever exist. which kind of makes sense since most of the stuff is based off of, the Great Human Demon War and, and the Laplace War. So this city has really definitely seen many things in its time. And honestly, that's all I have to say. Can't really explain it more because Rudy just doesn't explore this place. I want him to do that, so I got more to say, but sadly, that's all. We just get whatever's on the first page, and that was it. So that's all I have to say about locations. And obviously, if you could tell by this, locations got little time compared to character, which is fine. But, I want world building. I want to see what Rudius thinks of these locations, or, put his spin on it so I can actually find it a bit more interesting. But, you do you. Then again, people enjoy this for the world building, and I don't see why when we don't actually explore it. But, whatever. That's their opinion, and I have my own. Alright, now let's talk about iconic moments. So the first moment I want to talk about is the talk after the ambush. Now, Rudius and his party have to go to Ars to make sure that Ariel becomes queen. But something happened where they can't just teleport there. So they have to go there on foot, and on the way they get ambushed by assassins and stuff because Ariel is a candidate to become queen and people want her dead. And after an ambush, everyone talks about how to proceed afterwards. And it's mostly because I think the people that were sent there were from the Notice Grey Rat family. So it kind of puts a blow on who they really have as allies. Rudy suggests that they go with the bandits because they need to find a person that's there so that Ariel has a good way to actually get on the throne. But Luke wants to ask Pergus for help. Without knowing what happens next, Rudius' option actually does sound crazy. Why go with criminals when you can go with one of your allies? But Ariel chooses Rudius' option, so Luke gets upset. And the reason why I kind of put this here is because it's kind of like the first step of Luke getting controlled by the man god. Ariel chooses Rudius over him, even though he's been with her for so long. So she should know that Luke only knows the best of her while Rudius barely knows her. And it kind of does put a what the heck moment to their friendship in a way. And probably is the gateway of where the man god stepped in and was like, hey, Rudius is a bad guy. You need to stop him if you want to actually protect your princess. And that's kind of why I put this moment here. Next, we got Rudius and Ariel talk with each other. Now, after some way, Rudius and Ariel go to the woods to talk with each other. And Ariel questions the loyalty of Luke, because he's got upset when she didn't choose his way over Rudius's. And Rudius then tells Ariel that he might be manipulated by the man god. And Ariel wonders what he means by that. And when Rudius kind of explains everything, Ariel then wonders if she can meet Orstrid. And he wasn't sure about this, but Orstrid shows up to her and she becomes scared. Now, this is normal because Orstrid has a curse on him. So it's kind of understandable why Ariel would get scared and all that. And even though she's scared, she kind of puts it in her political mode and asks to join Orstrid's side so that the man god doesn't win and all that. And the reason why I kind of put this here is because it actually kind of has a good thing for Rudius. Now, instead of trying to convince her why she needs to do these things, Ariel will actually agree with Rudius whenever he says something. And so whenever decisions are made, Rudius will be there because he is like the voice of Orstrid. Orstrid knows what Rudius needs to do, and she will go to him for any answers and all that. So it really changes the tide in the favor of Orstrid and Rudius over the man god. Next, we got meeting Triss. So Triss was the person that they needed to meet, and that's why Rudius suggested they meet up with the bandits. And after a while traveling, they reach the bandit camp. And while they're there, Rudius asks for Triss to come here. And instead of being like this weak, timid girl that, would be traumatized, Triss arrives and she's like Eris. She's very angry. She seems like she can hold her own in a fight. And, she seems very strong. And as she is complaining, Ariel goes and talks with her. And Triss remembers her, Ariel remembers her, and they start talking. Triss tells Ariel the story, and the story makes her sad, and Ariel promises to get justice for her, and because of this, Triss agrees to join them on her journey to get revenge. This moment's here because this is like one of the last final things they needed to do before going to Ars and actually, making Ariel queen. And the one thing I gotta say is that this moment really happens too quick. I think one problem would be Triss would have something against nobles in a way, because a noble messed her life up. She was a noble herself, and a nobility basically took her life away. There could have been moments where we needed to actually build up to that, but it's just done like that. And in my opinion, should have been longer. There should have been some like trust test, or see if she really should join there, something like that. And that's just my thoughts on it. It's still a good moment, but could have been some more things they could have done in that moment. Next, we got Sylphie and Eris talk. Now, this is not really like a big moment. This is more of like a slice of life moment. During their time traveling, Rudius actually talks about things, and it's mostly on what life would have been if Eris was ruling. And they also talk about children and all that stuff, simple slice of life things. I think in here they talk about how like each one of them is jealous. Sylphie's jealous that Eris was Rudius's first time, and Eris is jealous because Sylphie gave birth to Rudius's child first. So, they're just talking about each other and having a good conversation, and nothing wrong can go there. You need some happiness and moments where it gets very distressful, and that's kind of why I put this here. Next, we got talking in Rakit. Now, during their stay in Rakit, Ariel, Triss, and Luke talk about what happened to Eris's grandfather. Most likely on how he was executed, because during the teleportation incident, Eris's grandfather was killed, and they kind of think of who the main culprit is. One of the main culprits they think was Luke's father, and the reason why they're talking about this is because Ariel promises to let Glyceline kill him once they get there if she does her job as a bodyguard. Of course, Luke doesn't want this because it's his father. Why would anyone allow their father to be slain by anyone? And it's also here that Luke thinks about Rudius trying to take the Grey Rat title. But Rudius doesn't care about that. He just wants to live his normal life. And then afterwards, it is here that Ariel finds out that Luke is influenced by the man god. And this is kind of why I kind of put this moment here. It's an important moment all in all, but this is like the big moment where it is confirmed Luke is being manipulated. And they need to find a way to actually do this so that Luke doesn't interfere. Because now that Luke is being manipulated, it's kind of hard to trust him with anything, because he might do something that will benefit the man god. And I really do like this. And honestly, if I were to say, this should have been where Volume 17 should have ended. Because then we would have gotten build up to Trish, and also this would have been left on a cliffhanger, like, oh no, what's going to happen next? Luke is now being manipulated by the man god. What do we do? But no, the story continues, and it continues to the very end. I know I'm sounding bitter, but I'm just wondering why this was one volume. This definitely would have worked if he had added some extra things to this. But anyway, that's talking in regret. That's all I have to say about that. And then next, we got the big party. So once they get to Ars, they do some planning and all that stuff. And most of this planning takes place on this moment, where a lot of things happen here in this party. Ariel and her party arrive in a big room with many minor nobles. And then later on, the major players, like the Grey Rats and even the Prime Minister, show up because they're major nobles, and the major people usually arrive late. And it's also here that Amber shows up and talks with Brutus, kind of declaring war on him, saying oh, that's a shame that you got ambushed and all that stuff, and kind of making it where next time he will finish the job or something like that. And then after everyone comes into the room, Ariel talks to him. She first introduces Tristina to everyone and tells her story of what happened. How she was sold as a slave by the Prime Minister, and that the Prime Minister kind of covered it up. Prime Minister tries to make it where the story is fake, saying like, we found her body, she is dead, and even her father can admit it to it. But Tristina's father confirms that the story was true and that that's his daughter, and kind of messes up the whole plan. And then it's because of this that Darius actually breaks down and is scared and realizes he doesn't have any allies. And Rudius kind of does explain it really well, saying like the real person that they want as their ruler is Gabriel, because Darius, yes, was an important person, but he was only important because Gabriel chose him as prime minister. Everyone probably knew he was a bad person and they didn't want anything to do with it, so they were fine letting him be tossed in jail. And then it's after that Gabriel shows up and defends Darius, saying like, even though he is a bad person, he's doing his job and we need him to protect us. It's also here that he says, why not we actually just do a vote here? If people think Darius is guilty, we'll throw him in jail. He will rot. Or most likely he'll be executed because he did do a serious crime. And instead of backing down, she's like, you know what? That sounds like a good idea. And then right as she says that, she signals for Pergus to show up. Ariel introduces him and the nobles kneel down because, they respect him. And as Pergus begins to sit, he makes Ariel sit on the ruler's chair, basically clarifying that she will become queen. And not even Gabriel can prevent that. And this is like a big moment if you've read it. And I do agree that it's like one of the top 10 moments in Mushoku Tensei in general. This is really cool and shows the power and planning Ariel has. And it kind of does make it to where she will be a good queen. Because, you could be a good person. You could be a bad person. But that doesn't mean you don't know how to rule or you do know how to rule. There have been many times when people would call rulers ruthless, but in the end, their actions actually justified with what happens later. But the same thing could be said with a good person. Even though they could be a very good person, sometimes their actions don't justify and can cause problems later down the line. But here, it shows Ariel knows what she's doing and definitely will be the right ruler for this kingdom. And that's why I like this moment. Next, we got Rita attacks. Now, after this big moment where Ariel crushes her brother, Rita attacks the party to help Darius and Gabriel. She cuts up a lot of people and keeps everyone else frozen in place. She tells Amber to finish Ariel and her party, but like I said earlier, Amber's kind of hesitant to do so because even though he was paid, kind of doesn't want to do this, doesn't think it's right. But you gotta do what you gotta do to live, and it's kind of understandable. And as soon as this happens, the Royal Knights show up because the Prime Minister was very paranoid and thought something bad like this would happen. And while they show up, Rudius puts a lot of mana in his finger, which freaks Rita out. I think mostly because it would have been like a bomb, and energy in a bomb makes the bomb bigger. And because of this, Rita tells Amber to take Darius out of there. And it's afterwards that, while Amber is actually gone, that she tells a story about Darius and her, and like how the man god manipulated her to help him and all that. And one of the biggest things to happen is like at the very end where Ostrich shows up. And after he heard, oh, God said I would be able to do this, he's like, okay, time to kill you now because I now know you're a pawn of the man god. And eventually they put up a big fight and Ostrich kills her. And the reason why I put this here is because it is a big moment. It's really cool. Rita comes in, saves Darius in the last second, but we get more character development, feel bad for her, and also feel sorry that she was manipulated. And Ostrich comes up, really cool guy, kills her, and all that stuff. So there's a lot of cool things that happen in this moment. Next, we got Amber's last battle. So Amber tries to escape with Darius, but is caught up by Rudius, Eris, and Glyceline. Darius tries to save himself and confesses that he was the one who killed Eris's grandfather, which was a total mistake because Eris really did care about her grandfather. tries to defend it like, even though I killed this guy, the divorce line still exists, so your family's not completely dead. And then afterwards, Amber fights the party and loses, like badly. He actually dies. And then also afterwards, Doris dies. And that's kind of it. It's a cool moment, end to a really interesting character for a bit, and an end to one of the worst people ever to exist. So yeah. Next we got Luke's perspective. Now, after all this stuff happens, Luke's father tries to win favor with Ariel, but fails. So much so that Ariel actually orders Luke to cut off his head. But instead of that, he takes Ariel hostage, and Sylphie points her wand at him, ready to kill him, because he's gone crazy now. He was sworn to protect her, and look at him now trying to kill her. Luke tries to convince her that Orstrud can't be trusted and asks her if she would follow the princess's orders or Rudius. She chose Rudius without any hesitation, which makes him sad. And after thinking about it, he realizes that what he's doing is wrong. What the heck are you doing, man? You're taking the person you swore as queen hostage? And after he realizes, he stops. But unlike his father, who tried to save himself, he actually accepts the punishment that is going to happen and actually expects her to actually kill him. But instead of actually killing him, she actually smiles and kind of makes a joke, being like, weird that you were groping me now. Girl Lakiyama is in a groping mood. And that kind of ends this moment. So this happens, but all in all, it was from Luke's perspective. He is kind of torn by this, His father actually was trying to save his house, so that's why he was doing that. And influenced by the man god, he thinks this guy all of a sudden shows up and Ariel's actually trying to defend him? What the heck is going on? This isn't right. He's evil and all that. But over time, you get to see him cool down and realize that he's gone crazy. He's trying to kill the princess, and he realizes that what he's doing is wrong. This was definitely a cool moment to help build up Luke's character, and it really made this volume a good volume in my eyes. Next we got Orstrud and Rudius talk. Now, this is just a normal thing that happens. Rudius is trying to talk to him, saying what's next and all that. But another thing that's really important here is that we kind of realize a big thing about Orstrud, and that mostly he's in a time loop. And the reason why he knows these things happen is because he's been on it so many times that he needs to know how to kill the man god. And it's here that he knows that certain moments will actually happen. So he knew that Ariel was the right choice because he's seen it happen many times of Ariel actually does become the ruler. And he knows many other things because of these time loops. And it kind of puts a bigger perspective that he can't really see the future. He's just experienced so many different timelines that he knows what to expect from now on. And that's kind of why I put this here. A big reveal of Orstrud that I never thought was a thing. Next we got Ariel thanks Rudius and Sylphie. Now, after all this craziness, Ariel asks Rudius to meet her in her room, and he comes over with Sylphie because he doesn't want rumors going around that Rudius and Ariel have a thing. Ariel thanks both of them for what they've done and asks what they want as payment. Rudius wants his rigid figures and the rigid book to sell here so that he could try his best to actually clear up Rigid's name. And Ariel actually accepts it. Even though the Millis Church will be against it, she says, as long as you have money, you can do anything. And that's kind of the actual truth here. And then at the very end of this moment, Ariel and Sylphie have a nice emotional moment, saying they've been friends for a decade. And she really treasures what Sylphie had done. And I really do enjoy this. It's a really good moment, and it's one of the last goodbyes they have to say before they have to go back home. And then next we got Glyceline's final training session. Now, on another day, Glyceline tells Rudius and Eris to come out and train with them. Rudius and Eris fight Glyceline together like they were when they were kids, and then Glyceline asks Eris to fight her by herself because that's what she had been doing. And after their match, Eris wins, and both Eris and Rudius bow their heads to Glyceline. And honestly, out of the goodbyes, this was probably my favorite. You didn't get to see much of Ariel and Sylphie, but you did get to see Eris, Rudius, and Glyceline, because, you know, Rudius was there. And to see their final goodbyes is probably like one of the saddest things to happen, because Glyceline was a great warrior, but also she was a wonderful teacher, and I really hope that we do get to see her one day, because it was a really heartwarming moment that Rudius and Eris were able to share. And then the final goodbye that we have is Luke's goodbye, and I'll call this moment Luke Says Goodbye. So Sylphie says goodbye to all her fans that she doesn't really know, and then she says goodbye to some people that she used to work with, and that also includes Luke. And they have their final conversation. You know, he has like a joke with like Rudius saying like, you know, Sylphie ever gets tired of you, or you ever get tired of Sylphie, we got maids here that you can spend time with. And Sylphie didn't like that. And also he says to Sylphie that, you know, if ever that Rudius becomes a person you can't live with, then, you know, you're free to come here too. Not as a romantic partner, but as, you know, friends and stuff. And it's a good one, and it definitely helped when we get to learn more of Luke's perspective. And I do say this one was a good one, in my opinion. And then finally, we got just Rudius and Sylphie talking. So, out of all the people in this volume, the life that really changed the most was Sylphie. Sylphie, for the longest time, has been protecting Ariel for a decade. And now that she is no longer her bodyguard, she did her promise and is now the queen, she wonders what to do now. And it is there that she decides the biggest goal now is she's going to take care of the children. She sees herself as a neglectful mother because she took her job very seriously. And to make up for that, she wants to actually become a good mother to not only her child, but also to Roxy's child. Because Roxy would definitely not give up her job at the university. So it would actually be a good idea to have someone actually be there and take care of the mother and all that. And I do gotta say, even though this moment is supposed to be a lighthearted moment, it is kind of sad now thinking about it. Ever since we met Sylphie in Volume 8, the main thing was that she was Ariel's bodyguard. And the fact that at the end of this volume, she's no longer Ariel's bodyguard does change the big thing about her. Now, I'm not saying Ariel's bodyguard was her personality, but it was like her life. You know, that's where her friends were. That's what she knew how to do. That was her life. But now that she no longer is a part of that life, it really does question, like, what does she do now? Of course, Rudius is fine with her, you know, having a second dream and all that, but she's just fine being a good mother. And I do gotta say, and it's definitely a good way to end this volume. Rudius talks to his wife, and now Sylphie is going to be there and actually be a good mother. And that's all the iconic moments I have. A lot of stuff really does happen in this volume. And although that's a good thing, I will say this again. This should have been more than one volume. I don't know why this was compressed into one volume. A lot of stuff happens, and I think this should have been spread out to multiple volumes. 2 at least, in my opinion. And that's the final time I'll say this here, but I'll tell you more about it in the next part. Alright, let's end this volume. Now, if I were to rank this volume, I would rank it a B. The one thing that's really strong about this volume is characters. It really does have some interesting characters, and also the moments were pretty great too. Some minor characters got some interesting, you know, detail and also backstory, and some major characters actually had great perspectives. Well, Luke did. He was the only one that did. We got so many great goodbyes, and it was really sad to see all these people leave, and it was just, all in all, a good volume. Now, why is it not good? Well, I've said it so many times, and I'll say it again. This should have been 2 volumes. A lot of stuff happens, and the fact that this squishes it so down to like 1 volume, doesn't really make sense to me. Most of the times, this volume feels like it's being rushed, mostly in the beginning. What they should have done is had their traveling point be one volume, and then eventually build up there. Main thing getting to get Trish, and then eventually having the Ars part be its own volume and build up of that. I never saw why this was one volume. It didn't feel like that. It felt like he was trying to rush this all into one volume just to have the major parts. He should have had some more moments where we probably would have explored the city, probably would have known who Ariel was playing against, because that would have made it interesting. It would have had great world building that I know lots of people like, especially I do, and it would have had a lot more character development to a lot of people. Even though the character development was good, we could have gotten a bit more, is all I'm saying. And that's all I have to say about it. Good volume all together, but honestly, he should have split this up into 2 volumes.
Alright, and that is the end of this video. If you really enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this. And come back next time as I talk about Volume 18. Now that Ariel has become queen, the downfall of the man god will surely happen. And as always, I am the Anime Bro. Have a wonderful day, and see you guys later. Peace!